The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. The 11 disciples made their way to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had summoned them. At the sight of him, those who have entertained doubts fell down in homage. Jesus came forward and addressed them in these words: "Full authority has been given to me both in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Teach them to carry out everything I have commanded you, and know that I am with you always until the end of the world." The Gospel of the Lord. Lord Jesus Christ. Let us all be seated. Today is Trinity Sunday, and we also remember in our Mass the Bishop of Batanes, Carmelo Gregorio, who passed away 2 weeks ago while he was retiring here in our monastery. He passed away at Cardinal Santos Hospital. He was transferred to Batanes 2 days ago and will have his burial probably tomorrow or the next day. Bishop Camilo Gregorio is known to all of you as having celebrated very often the Mass of Our Lady of Guadalupe on our December 12 celebration. He is not Bishop Sinense, whom you see often on Sunday Mass. Bishop Sinense is just abroad, invited for a graduation, but he will be back to celebrate Mass for you in 3 weeks' time when he returns. The Mass for today is for Trinity Sunday. This is the first most important doctrine of the Catholic Church. It is the first supernatural truth that we must believe to become truly Catholic. We must believe that there is one God, but that there are 3 persons in one God. The mystery of the Blessed Trinity is one of the biggest proof the Catholic Church has that our religion is the only religion that is made by the true God. If you will notice, all other religions have gods that man can easily invent. But our God, one God with 3 persons, is something no man can ever invent. It has even never entered the minds of man that there is a possibility that there can be one God, but three persons in one God. And for us to be truly Catholic, we must be able to put together the two concepts of one God and three persons in one God. It is difficult, it is impossible to even imagine this because it goes contrary to all science of mathematics and algebra. How can one be equivalent to three? And how can three be equivalent to one? Now that is impossible mathematically. But then if you look at man himself, you will see that it is possible. Why? Because look at you. You have one soul. But your soul have two faculties, the mind and the free will. So you are three faculties in you, but there is only one person. You are one person. You have a soul, it's one. You have a mind, that's the second. And you have a free will, that's the third. So even if you are one, there are three faculties in you. And precisely we, human beings, are images of God. Well, if you sit down and think about it, you will begin to understand the mystery of the Blessed Trinity. If you will notice, in the last 3 Sundays, Jesus Christ had been having such a difficult time explaining the mystery of the Blessed Trinity to his own apostles. They could never imagine 3 persons in one God, but that was required for them to be truly the disciple of Christ. And so the gospel for today says, Christ spoke to his disciples and said, "Go to all nations." And what are they supposed to do? They are supposed to make you, Filipinos, disciples of Christ, and this is done in 3 steps. That's why you have to find out if you have undergone these 3 steps, because that's the only time you are truly Catholics and therefore will surely go to heaven when you die. The first step is for you to be baptized. The second is for you to know what are the commandments of Christ. And third, you must know how those commandments are to be put into practice. An example of the commandment of Christ is to pray unceasingly, to pray without stopping. That's the command. Number 3 is How do you do that? How do you pray without stopping? So those are the 3 steps. The first step is you must be baptized. Why? Because for you to know the commandments of Christ, you need grace. And you receive that grace during baptism. The commandments of Christ cannot be taught by men. I cannot teach it. The Pope cannot teach it. Bishops cannot teach it. Only Christ can teach you what are His commandments. And He will teach you His commandments when you receive grace, which all of us have received during baptism. And then, after knowing the commandments of Christ, you must interpret it correctly. You must know how it is done. How do you pray unceasingly? How to pray unceasingly is not found in scriptures. It is not found in the Gospels. And that's the reason why the priest gives you a homily. The homily is supposed to teach you how to put into practice the commandments of Christ that are read in the Gospel. I myself and priests and bishops and even the Pope do not know the interpretation. Not one of us. No teacher in theology in the seminary know the interpretation of the commandments of Christ in the Gospel. Only Jesus Christ knows it. And because we have to know them, Jesus Christ gave the interpretation to His apostles. But the apostles never wrote it down. However, they taught it to the fathers of the church. The fathers of the church are the bishops who succeeded the apostles. Because they succeeded the apostles, they knew the correct interpretation. And so when I give you a homily explaining the commandments of Christ from the Gospel, I have to get the interpretation from the fathers of the church. I cannot give my own interpretation. It is a very serious sin for me to give my own personal interpretation of the Gospel. Why? Because I do not know the interpretation. And therefore, if it comes from me, you can almost be certain it is the wrong interpretation. And so for you to become Catholics, I must do these 3 things that Christ commanded His apostles to do. First, I must baptize you. But since all of you had been baptized already, I do not have to do it anymore. Secondly, I must teach you the commandments of Christ which are written in the Gospels. And so what I did was I read the Gospel for today that you may know the commandments of Christ. And thirdly, I have to give you the interpretation on how that commandment must be put into practice, and I must get it from the fathers of the church. That is why, if you notice, when I give homilies, I always quote Saint Thomas of Aquinas, Saint Augustine, Saint Bartholomew, and so forth and so on, to show you it does not come from me. However, we live in very bad times. Sometimes priests are in a hurry to give their homilies. They prepare it carelessly, and so they often give their own interpretation, which are erroneous. Today you have so many laymen who are preaching to you, and yet they have absolutely no preparation in knowing the teachings of Christ and interpreting the teachings of Christ. And so there is a great possibility that you are learning wrong doctrines. And notice the words of the gospel. What you have to know and what you have to do to go to heaven. Christ says, first, you must be baptized in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Second, you must learn everything. Everything. Not one half, not one third. You must know everything I have commanded you, as written down in the gospel. Everything. And thirdly, you must carry out or put into practice everything I have taught you. Not one half, not one third. It has to be everything. Now, if you miss a Mass on Sunday, what you know is no longer everything. If you forget what you heard on Sunday Mass, completely forgetting it, you do not know anymore everything. And if you do not know many things because you miss Mass or you forget what you have heard during the homily, then you do not know everything. You cannot practice everything. You cannot go to heaven. So it is so important for us, if you notice, that you have to keep on going to Mass year in, year out, to keep on reviewing everything that Christ has taught. That's the reason why you keep on going to Mass and coming to Mass and listening to homily, because you forget, or sometimes you miss the lesson taught on Sundays. And if you forget or you miss something, you no longer know everything. And so the apostles were never told to preach. They were not, unless they knew everything. And they knew everything today, Trinity Sundays. And because they knew everything today, they understood the mystery of the Blessed Trinity, on how three persons can be one God. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.